I am as shocked to say this as you probably are to hear it, but Donald Trump was humiliated, dare I say humbled, by and in front of the people whose opinion he cares the most about. Business people. You know, billionaires, CEOs, the type he wants to cut taxes for. And before you say that's an impossibility, the man has no shame, let me explain. Because let's be honest, Donald Trump is no stranger to stepping in shit, or more famously, sitting in it. But he dove head first into a steaming stool pile and came out not only stinking to high heaven, but utterly humiliated by business leaders and CEOs writ large. And trust me, you do not want to miss the hilarious cosmic karma of this humiliating saga, so stick around. Now, Trump's no good, very bad day started first with him lying about an endorsement from a major CEO who got the humiliation train rolling by shutting that down big time, and then, and most embarrassingly of all, with the launching of the new coalition Business Leaders for Harris campaign, which is a project of the Republican Accountability PAC that launched a podcast, a website, and a brutal testimonial video. LinkedIn co-founder Reid Hoffman, Netflix co-founder Reed Hastings, and many more business leaders and CEOs that took brutal aim at Donald Trump and his economic policies that you're not gonna wanna miss. So the saga starts with Trump posting on Truth Social today that he was endorsed by Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan Chase. But it turns out that a spokeswoman for JP Morgan Chase told Mediaite that those rumors are not accurate and Dimon has not made an endorsement in the race. In fact, last month, Dimon said, "I'm not endorsing anyone at this time," and said he'd rather focus on policy. Clearly, someone is looking for a little more than just tariffs and concepts of a plan. But even worse, last fall it was reported that Dimon was backing Trump's GOP primary rival Nikki Haley and attempting to get other business leaders to do the same. And you want to know how we know Trump was utterly humiliated by this? Because he insisted he had no idea his Truth Social account made the claim, saying, "I don't know anything about it." Setting aside the fact that the man lies every time he breathes, does he really expect us to believe anyone but him has access to his account? Oh, let me guess. Someone else tweeted, "I hate Taylor Swift and I hate Bruce Springsteen." Yeah, okay. But it's pretty clear why he'd be humiliated by that and want to lie. Remember when he had that abysmal meeting with business CEOs that had initially supported him and then bailed after they heard him speak?
Andrew, more takeaways from Trump's meeting with business leaders. What was the reception like?
Well, it was interesting. I spoke to a number of the CEOs who were at that meeting yesterday, a number of whom, frankly, had been predisposed to President Trump, in fact, former President Trump. And they walked away from that meeting, I think, a bit disheartened, a bit questioning, I don't want to say his mental fitness, but questioning just how meandering, how in some cases one said to me, he could not keep a thought straight. He would go in one direction and then he'd go in another direction, and that there wasn't really necessarily a through line to the way he spoke or what even he was talking about. At one point, and you described it earlier, he discussed his plans to bring the tax rate down from the corporate tax rate down from 21% to 20%. And apparently, at some point in the meeting, was asked about why he had chosen 20%. And he said, well, it's a round number. And I think that unto itself had a number of CEOs shaking their head, given that 1% of the total tax burden on the country is actually a huge number in terms of what is needed to support the revenue for this country.
And actual successful businessman Mark Cuban, who's featured in the brutal Business Leaders for Harris campaign testimonial we'll see shortly, has been a vocal supporter of Kamala Harris's vision for the economy and a staunch critic of Trump's.
But across the board, tariffs 10 or 20% is just inflationary. It's a tax on the American consumer. But to make matters even worse, and what's truly insane, when you threaten a legendary company like John Deere with a 200% tariff if they move, but only a 10 or 20% tariff on China, what you're doing is you're making it easy for the Chinese competitors to take business away from John Deere.
On a recent Harris campaign call, you compared policy proposals made by Trump to those from Independent Senator Bernie Sanders, who's a socialist. What do you mean?
Well, it was a race for socialism, right? Bernie said that credit card companies should cap their rates, their interest rates at 15%. Donald Trump, being the socialist that he is, had to beat Bernie. So Donald Trump went out and recommended that interest rate caps be set to 10%. The fact that he's even suggesting price controls and price caps is socialism 101. You haven't heard that from the vice president. You have heard that from Donald Trump.
Well, then how do you interpret?
How
do you interpret what she's doing in terms of price gouging, taking on price gouging by food companies? Because a lot of critics have said that is a form of price controls.
I'm glad you asked me that, Jake, because taking on price gouging is not price controls. She's not saying what the price of tomatoes should be. What she's saying is when there's a crisis, and there will be other crises, there'll be hurricanes, there'll be tornadoes, there'll be floods, there'll be other disasters. And when those disasters happen, she wants to be in a position to be able to say, no, you can't jack up those prices by 40%. You have to stay within a particular realm, a particular guideline. And by the way, there are already 37 states that have similar guidelines. All she's doing is saying we're just going to make that a national law. So that's certainly not price caps or price controls at all. Donald Trump, on the other hand, is the king of price caps.
Today, adding his expertise further on MSNBC.
The difference between her and Donald Trump, to her point, Donald Trump will say what fits to the audience. When I talk to her team about different things, whether it's healthcare, whether it's tariffs, whatever it may be, she goes back and her team does a full analysis. She doesn't just say yes or no. They really dig into what she said. What's the impact?
Which brings us to the cornerstone of this whole humiliation arch. This devastating Business Leaders for Harris campaign launch video that is kickstarting not only the group's website, but a podcast as well.
I'm Reid Hoffman, co-founder of LinkedIn and partner at Greylock. The most important issue in this upcoming election is our economy. Voters want the candidate who's going to make it easier to get a job, buy a house, keep up with their household expenses. And a lot of people think that Donald Trump is that candidate. But here's the thing. Donald Trump's policies, his divisive rhetoric, and his disregard for stability in the rule of law would hurt our economy. Most CEOs I talk to agree. And that's why we started this project, Business Leaders for Harris, where I sit down with CEOs, founders, and business leaders to discuss why Kamala Harris is the right candidate to build a healthy, strong, and growing American economy.
And this is huge, folks, because not only is Donald Trump being ridiculed and humiliated by the only community he's ever desperately desired to be accepted by, but he's also losing so much support he has to lie about endorsements, and podcasts are a weekly thing. So if this keeps going, when Trump loses, he'll have to continue to hear about how shitty of a businessman he is well after the election. As hopefully his endless trials and maybe some new ones for who knows, fraud, election denial, more fraud, continue to carry out and hopefully, rightfully, land his ass in jail. Thanks for watching, folks. For Really American, I'm Kenny Hesse, and I'll see you in the next one.